Hello, educators. I'm Julie Hasson, author of Safe, Seen, and Stretched in the Classroom. Since that book's come out, I've been talking to other researchers and authors about how their work intersects with the concepts of safe, seen, and stretched. I know you're going to love this conversation with my friend Tammy Musiowsky-Borneman, author of The Minimalist Teacher, when we discuss how getting rid of distractions can help us strengthen relationships with our students. I know Tammy has helped me really think about my purpose, my priorities, helped me pare down, maybe not my bookshelf, but other parts of my life. And I hope Tammy's advice helps you too. I know that getting rid of physical clutter in our spaces, mental clutter in our heads can help us really focus on the students in front of us. So enjoy this conversation. Let us know what you think in the comments.
Hello, everybody. I am here with my friend Tammy Musiowsky-Borneman, author of The Minimalist Teacher, which I read over holiday break. Perfect timing for that content and loved it. And I selfishly wanted to ask Tammy a bunch of questions today. So she agreed to let me record this conversation for all of you who I know will also have a million questions for Tammy. So welcome. I'm going to let you introduce yourself,
Sure.
tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
That sounds good. Thanks so much, Julie, for the invitation. It's always exciting when people reach out after they've read something that I know as a fellow author, like when someone reads your things, it's really exciting because you get to hear the thoughts that, the connections that people have. So thank you very much for reaching out. This is fun. And so as you mentioned, I'm Tammy. I co-authored this book, The Minimalist Teacher, with a good friend of mine, Christine Arnold. She and I met when we were teaching in Singapore at an international school. So that friendship began a few years ago. And we just started out, as teachers beside each other in the next room together. And we just, lots of conversations ended up becoming this book that we think is super timely. Although when we were writing it, we didn't realize we were going to be living through a pandemic, but we thought, it's even more timely now. So that's kind of her and I, our background. She's currently living in the Netherlands, teaching and living there. So she's 11 hours ahead of me. We wrote the book in different countries the whole time, in different time zones. So that was a fun part of the writing process. But a few years ago, I left teaching full time. I was elementary teacher since the early 2000s. I started in 2003. Prior to that, I was a teaching assistant. So I started in education in the late 90s. And so I've seen lots of changes and some things that haven't changed over time. But in that journey, I've just had a bunch of different roles, but always elementary classroom teacher was nearest and dearest to my heart because I love that elementary age. And I taught back home in Canada in Edmonton, moved to New York City to teach for a number of years there. And then my husband and I moved to Singapore for a few years and I taught there. And then after a couple of years there, I wanted to transition out full-time teaching, but I wanted to still stay connected to students and teachers. So I started subbing. And that was just so awesome because I got to connect with more students and got to know basically an entire school community, which was so great, and a bunch of new teachers. And during that time, I just kind of opened the door to like more writing, more networking on a professional level, just meeting people over in that region of the world that I hadn't done before. And that time just was so fulfilling and prosperous in so many ways that I'm just so fortunate that now I'm sitting here with you, and who would know this was going to happen even a couple of years ago, right? So that's me in kind of a big nutshell, I guess.
Oh, that was perfect. So talk a little bit about your path to minimalism. What does that mean to you?
There's I think this is something that Christine and I have talked about a lot in the past, and having the life experiences of moving abroad really play into that, because you have to be really strategic about what you're bringing with you when we think about physical things. But you also have to think about the things that you bring with you, because you know how when you move, or when you go, or even when you're on vacation, you're away from people and you're away from certain things. So you have to think about more than just what you're leaving behind physically, like your home, your house and your things. But there's a lot of mental preparation that you need for that. And so Christine and I have talked quite a lot just about the moving experience. We know a lot of friends who've moved abroad to teach, and who are continuing to move around and teach in different places. And that's kind of where some of our thinking came from, and then adapting it into education. But what really was a turning point, I think, for me, was when I left teaching in New York City and I moved to my new classroom, my new school in Singapore, and that huge contrast of even just the physical space. Mm-hmm. So I was teaching in public school in New York with a co-teacher, and she and I were really great about streamlining systems and setting up structure. So that was all fine. But there was just so many things, right? We had like systems for our assessments, and how does this need to look, and what are we doing for these students? And so she and I had a great relationship. We collaborated on everything, and we served as kind of a model for other teachers. But we still had so much we were trying to navigate. And when you're in a classroom with 33 students, and you've got assessment binders, and you have desks, and you have bodies and papers hanging, and charts, and all of those things, it's really overwhelming just when you walk in the classroom in the morning. And so there were some days where I was feeling like, I can't look at the paper, like I can't look at the anchor charts today. It's making me feel anxious, and it's not helping, because she and I taught in a co-teaching environment where 40% of our kids had extra learning needs. So they were diagnosed with something, and that all that paper and all that stuff is hard on kids, and it was hard on me. So she and I really thought about, we used muted colors, like a nice blue, so it felt calm. Tried to streamline up as much as we could, but as the year goes on, it just ends up being a lot. And then, so when I left that and I moved into a classroom that was had nothing in it really, which is really unusual, because, as a teacher, you move into a new classroom after a few years, you inherit all of the old teacher stuff that's locked away in the cabinets, and it's been in there for a while. But I was one of the fortunate ones where I went in my classroom and there was really not much in there. And I felt like I didn't know what to do almost, because I was like, well, where's all the books for the library? And where is, like, I don't know. It was just really jarring almost, because even restarting a new year in New York, you have all your stuff in your boxes and you know what goes where and all of that. But I was really going in with just, a box of things that I knew I would use throughout the year, like my treasured read alouds and just certain things. But I arrived with a box and that was it. And so then I had to figure out everything else at the school, which was really refreshing. It was so nice to be able to just start from scratch and then build the environment with my kids. And, we just, everything that was on the walls, I kind of put an idea up, like this might be where the word wall is, and maybe this is where your math stuff goes. But if it doesn't work, we can change it. And so I felt like when we had this blank slate, I was able to refocus just on the kids in front of me. It was so lovely. And I had a smaller class because physically the rooms were also smaller, but it just really transformed. It was very transformative to go from that, overwhelming too many things to really pared down. So that was huge.
What a change. And I picked up your book over the holiday break because
Mhm.
my calendar was overwhelming. And I had all of these different pockets of things. Like I manage a grant and I teach grad students, and the book was coming out and my own family and all. And I just felt overwhelmed. And then your book came out, and I
Mhm.
thought, there's a system I can use to really think about priorities, what
Mhm.
needs to be cut, what is my focus, how can I do this more intentionally. Really, I kept thinking intention as I
Yeah.
read your book. So talk a little bit about teachers who are, which is all of us, right, overscheduled, overwhelmed, saying yes to too many things, trying to juggle it all.
Yeah. I'm I I'm kind of feeling a bit like that right now. I've spent the last couple of days redoing how I have my visuals up, because I'm feeling that a bit right now, and I'm not even teaching full time, but I have, a few different projects going on, and I was starting to lose sight of the purpose. And so I really had to think about, um, what am I doing right now that's front of mind that I know that I need to tend to. And if I was teaching, of course I would be thinking about, well, that's my students, right? In this role as a professional learning facilitator and contractor and consultant, I'm thinking, who do I need to kind of like to be there for right now, because I know that the project with them is priority. And so that really came to front of mind in a team meeting this morning, actually. And I feel like I was missing a piece. And I said to my team leader, I'm like, I feel like I've dropped the ball on this, kind of, even though I know I have time. But because I had to go through of reshuffling and rethinking and resorting, and asking myself those questions: what is my purpose, or sorry, what's my purpose for right now, and what is the priority within that? Because I was feeling swamped. And now today I feel a little better. I feel much better, actually, just because I was able to, this last month, change some of my systems. And so sometimes we have to revisit that, right? Where the priority isn't always the same. The purpose might be, right? But our priorities shift depending on what's happening at different points in the year. So right now, we're end of January. Some teachers are experiencing change in term or semester. So grading's happening and new classes are starting. So that's a totally different priority than in next week or the following week, because those are new students potentially coming in, or you're starting a new unit and you shift your thinking. But you always have to come back to, what's the priority right now at the beginning of this new unit, right? So you just fill in whatever's happening. And that has become just something we do automatically now, because it's so easy to fall into traps, and there's lots of them. So just being mindful and asking the question, especially when we're feeling that overwhelm and there's too many things, it really pays off to just pause, even if you're just sitting in your chair and you take that, 30 seconds, 1 minute, and you just ask yourself, what's the priority right now? And if you can answer it fast, then that's what you got to do.
I love that. And I have used that in my saying no. I have said,
So helpful.
I'm so sorry. That's just not, it doesn't fit with my priority right now.
Yeah.
Which is good for me and honest, and it has helped me kind of clear out some clutter.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, because it is hard to say no, but when you do, you can use your calendar as a backup, right? You can say, it doesn't fit in my calendar right now. Not that I wouldn't love to participate in that, I just can't right now. And maybe it's something you can revisit later, but only when it's going to fit and it's not going to feel like it's a burden or it's stressing you out, because then it's not worth it.
So helpful, and your framework is so helpful. The other thing I was thinking as I was reading is my research focus is on student-teacher relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of that is noticing something about your students and responding. And I find that distractions make us less likely to do that. So can you talk for a little bit about how eliminating some of those distractions might strengthen our relationships?
Yeah, that's huge. And I think that, like, I think back to when I was teaching full time and how easily I was distracted from the students a lot for a lot of different reasons. But I feel like most of the distraction came from compliance. So we get demands put on us, coming from our administrators, which sometimes aren't coming directly from them. They're coming from the district or the state, and things, have to be checked, boxes checked or forms filled out or whatever. And I do remember a number of times teaching in New York where my assistant principal would come to the door and she would say, I need this form, or I need a something right now, even though you're teaching. And like, I was fortunate, I had a co-teacher. However, I'm still teaching and both of us are active in those roles when we're in the classroom. There was no passive time. We always were very strategic with how we were teaching lessons or doing small group, and all of the interactions were very thoughtful. And so when we were interrupted from that, like, it disrupts your flow, right? Like, then you lose sight of what you were talking about, and you might be having this breakthrough conversation with a student, but they need a form. And so that, for me, was, it bothered me so much. And so thankfully I had a really good relationship with our administrators, because we just had to say, please don't come to the classroom when we're teaching, because that we are focusing on our students. And that can be a hard conversation to have. Also, the phone ringing, right? The main office calling all the time. And so, like, those were our two major disruptors, and they're huge ones, and they were happening all the time. But we had to have the conversation with our administrators about that precious time, because we had a special population of kids. Well, there's special kids every year, but we really had to tune into specific needs. And when we were interrupted from that, it just throws everything off. And so having those sort of challenging conversations pay off. They're worth it. They don't have to be long conversations, but if you bring it back to, I need to focus on my students during that time, would be happy to fill in this form at the end of the day or whenever. So planning in some of those, what seem like urgent and important things, like those high priority things, they probably aren't. Right? So when you're evaluating, is that piece of paperwork something that this other person needs right at this moment? Probably not. It's probably one of those medium priorities where we have a little wiggle room, but administrators have so many things to do too. They don't want to lose track of that paperwork they need. So they're walking by your classroom, they're just going to stop by. And that's real teaching, right? That's just the way it is. But that then on the administrator end as well, they have to be thoughtful about that too, because we teach and we're in teaching because of students, right? That's the point.
And it speaks to your notion of purpose and priority. So during that time, we have to stay in our purpose, prioritize those relationships, that responsiveness, and protect it by either creating those systems like you talked about for ourselves that keep us from being distracted, or having conversations with people about why we protect that time. Such good advice.
Yeah. And with that too, students see that interaction, right? And when they know that they are your priority, that changes a lot of interaction, and it develops your relationship because they know that you're there for them. And right, that's our purpose.
It's true. And it makes them feel valued and important.
Yes.
You're focused on me. You noticed what I needed. You responded to that need. You gave discretionary effort, all of those things that make kids feel valued and worthy and important. So before I let you go, Tammy, is there anything else you want listeners to know about minimalist teaching?
I think the most important thing to think about is that there's an entry point for a teacher or educator. You don't even have to be a teacher. You can read the book and pull things out for your life, right? But I saw a comment when someone was reading the book, and someone else's comment was, it's not possible to be a minimalist teacher. And that, we know in education, we talk all about mindsets, right? So it seems impossible, but there are pieces that, like, it's not an overnight thing. It's a process. You have to pick your entry point and you work from there. And through that work, you'll see that your process is going to keep going, because you'll see the benefits in one area and then you'll be ready to take on the next part. So the book is written so you don't have to read the whole thing even. You can just read one chapter and start there. But you pick your point. It might be just opening up a cupboard and cleaning it out. Start there, anywhere. But there's a point for everybody to begin. And the process is, it's a lot of self-reflection. But if you have someone to bring with you on it to work through the process, it's way more fun too.
It is. My husband, who's already very much a minimalist, read through it with me. He's very structured. But he picked up some great things from thinking through. Now, I started with my calendar. You can see that my bookshelf has not gotten to the paring down yet.
That's okay. Books are separate.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But this book is top of my shelf. I loved it. You really
Awesome.
started my new year off right. I felt so much less overwhelmed, more focused, certainly more intentional about my time and my priorities, and especially my purpose. So thank you, Tammy and Christine, for writing this beautiful book. I hope everybody listening will pick it up. I know they will gain a lot from reading it.
Thanks, Julie.